Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, The Intimacy Lab. Have you ever noticed that the harder you chase someone, the more they seem to slip away? Like sand through your fingers, the tighter you hold, the faster it disappears. Maybe you've felt this. A woman who once laughed at your jokes, leaned into your touch, now seems distracted, distant. You text first, you plan the dates, you initiate every conversation, and still something feels off, doesn't it? Let's be honest, this can feel exhausting and confusing. You begin to question yourself. Did I say too much? Did I not say enough? Am I doing something wrong, or is she simply losing interest? But what if I told you this? Sometimes the very energy you pour into chasing her is what pushes her away. Not because she doesn't care, but because the dynamic itself shifts. The dance of desire depends on space as much as closeness, on longing as much as fulfillment. When you chase, you stop being intriguing, you stop being the man who stands anchored in his own presence. In today's conversation, we're going to explore what really happens when you stop chasing her, not just as a tactic or game, but as a way of reclaiming your emotional balance, your confidence, your magnetism. And trust me, when you do this, everything changes. Have you ever noticed that the harder you chase someone, the more they seem to slip away? Like sand through your fingers, the tighter you hold, the faster it disappears. Maybe you've felt this. A woman who once laughed at your jokes, leaned into your touch, now seems distracted, distant. You text first, you plan the dates, you initiate every conversation, and still something feels off, doesn't it? But what's really going on here? Why does the energy shift so subtly, but so unmistakably when you begin to pursue too much, too often? It's as if something deep within her senses that you're no longer showing up as the grounded, confident man you once were, but as someone seeking validation, affirmation, reassurance, sometimes even permission to matter in her life. And this is where we begin. When you stop chasing her, something quite beautiful and paradoxical starts to unfold. But before that transformation can happen, you have to understand what chasing actually does, not just on the surface, but underneath in the emotional fabric of attraction itself. You see, desire thrives in space. It lives in the unknown, in the unscripted moments, in the places where curiosity can grow. When you chase, you collapse that space. Suddenly, she knows where you are all the time, not just physically, but emotionally. She senses your longing not as confidence but as need, and that shift, from being desired to feeling needed, can weigh heavily, even unconsciously, on a woman's heart. I know that may sound harsh, but let's take a moment to reflect on this dynamic from both perspectives. Imagine yourself on the receiving end of constant attention. Even when it comes from love or affection, too much predictability, too much availability, too much pursuit can actually flatten the emotional landscape between two people. And so it becomes less thrilling, less inspiring, less magnetic. So when you stop chasing her not as a punishment or strategy, but as a conscious choice, you allow the space between you to breathe again. That's when something fascinating begins to happen. She notices, she feels the shift, she wonders, where did he go emotionally? Why is he no longer so quick to respond? Is he busy with his own life? And that wonder, that curiosity is a doorway back into genuine connection. Let's pause for a moment and think about why this matters for you as a man. Many men have been taught, directly or indirectly, that to care is to pursue, that the more effort you show, the more worthy you become. But relationships, and attraction especially, don't work that way. A woman doesn't fall for you because you prove yourself endlessly. She falls when she feels a polarity of energy, a dance of closeness and distance that keeps her desire alive. So the very first shift that happens when you stop chasing is this: you return to yourself, you reclaim your emotional presence. Instead of being consumed by thoughts of how can I win her back, or what should I say next, you begin to focus inward. You start noticing your own needs, your own goals, your own boundaries again. And ironically, that return to your center is exactly what makes you attractive in the first place. I want you to really feel that, your groundedness, your sense of self, these are not only attractive traits but necessary ingredients for a healthy relational dynamic. When you're chasing, your energy is leaning forward, you are reaching out, almost pleading sometimes for connection. But when you stop, your energy comes home to you. You stand tall again. You move with intention, not with anxiety. Now let's talk about what happens to her in this moment. She begins to sense a change, even if she can't put it into words. Where she once felt your constant attention, she now feels a quiet distance, not coldness, not withdrawal, but an absence of need. And this absence invites her to step forward if she chooses, rather than feeling pressured to respond to you. It is in this space that respect begins to return. She begins to respect your boundaries, your self-respect, your independence. And respect is the seedbed of desire. I want you to understand that stopping the chase isn't about manipulation. It's about recalibrating the dynamic so that there is room for mutual curiosity and engagement. When you are no longer overly invested in every interaction, when you're not anxiously awaiting every reply, you begin to listen more deeply to her, yes, but also to yourself. And this is where you start to notice something else. Your energy shifts not only in this relationship, but in every area of your life. You become more present in your work, more engaged with your friends, more attuned to your own needs. You begin to reclaim hobbies and passions that may have been neglected while you were caught in the exhausting cycle of chasing. This change doesn't go unnoticed. When a man is rooted in his own sense of self-worth, he emits a kind of emotional freedom that is deeply attractive. It tells her and the world that he is a man who is whole within himself, and that kind of wholeness is magnetic. So let's bring this back to you, sitting here, perhaps reflecting on a woman who has felt just out of reach lately. Ask yourself gently, have you been leaning too far forward? Have you been giving from a place of insecurity rather than presence? Have you lost touch with your own rhythm, your own sense of who you are when you are not chasing? It's okay if you have. Truly, it's okay. Most of us have done this at some point. What matters is that you recognize the pattern, that you see it clearly, and that you choose to return home, to yourself. Because when you stop chasing her, the first and most beautiful thing that happens is this. You start leading again, not in the old-fashioned sense of dominance, but in the deeper, more meaningful way of leading your own life with integrity, intention, and groundedness. And from that place, true connection, if it is meant to happen, can begin to flourish naturally. And so, as you begin this shift, you'll notice subtle but profound changes in how she responds. Her energy softens. Her curiosity returns. The conversation flows more easily, not because you are forcing it, but because you are no longer forcing yourself into it. You see, when you stop chasing, you begin to cultivate space, not distance, but space for desire, respect, and mutual engagement to grow. And it is in that space that something much more meaningful than approval or attention can take root: intimacy. Now, this is just the beginning of what unfolds when you make this shift, but already you can feel how different the energy is, can't you? It's no longer about chasing. It's about returning to presence, about being the man who is fully engaged with his own life. And as you begin to embody this shift, moving from anxious pursuit back into your own grounded presence, you may notice something unexpected happening within yourself. That relentless urge to monitor her responses, to dissect every text, every glance, begins to quiet. There's a kind of freedom here that many men don't anticipate. It's the freedom of realizing that your worth was never meant to hinge on her attention. You start to wake up in the morning no longer preoccupied by whether she replied or why she seemed distant last night. Instead, your mind opens up space for yourself again, for your creativity, your health, your friendships, your purpose. And this is one of the most profound transformations that happens when you stop chasing her. You begin to re-center your emotional life around your own experience, not around her reactions. That shift alone has a ripple effect, not only in how she perceives you, but in how you feel about yourself. Suddenly, your emotional landscape is no longer dictated by her patterns or moods. You stop giving her the unconscious power to define your self-esteem, your confidence, or your peace of mind. And from this place, you can begin to experience women and relationships differently. Instead of treating attention as a currency you must earn through effort, you begin to approach women as equals, as individuals with their own rhythms, emotions, and needs. Now here's where it becomes really interesting. The paradox of desire is that we are often most drawn to people who feel complete within themselves. When you are busy chasing, you send a signal, not necessarily intentionally, that you have placed her at the center of your emotional world. That can feel heavy, even burdensome, to the person receiving it. But when you return to yourself, when you're emotionally self-sufficient, playful, relaxed, and at ease, she can feel it. She may not be able to articulate it, but it touches something in her psyche. This man doesn't need me to complete him, and that is attractive. It gives her permission to feel drawn back toward you, not because she feels obligated or pursued, but because she senses your emotional availability in a new way. You're no longer grasping, you're simply present, and think about how that changes the atmosphere between the two of you. Instead of her feeling the weight of your constant pursuit, she begins to feel the lightness of your curiosity again. Instead of needing her to affirm your worth, you offer her your presence as a gift, not an obligation. There's another important dimension here that we must explore gently. When you stop chasing, you begin to restore the balance of mystery. So much of attraction depends on mystery, not secrecy, but mystery, the sense that there is still something to discover about you. That you are not a solved puzzle, not a fixed figure who's always available on demand, but a man with depth, unpredictability, and life of his own. That mystery doesn't mean you withdraw or play games. It means you are truly engaged in your own life again, which creates a natural curiosity in the space between you. This is where women often begin to respond differently, sometimes even surprising themselves. She may suddenly reach out more, initiate contact, or express affection in ways she hasn't in a long time. But notice, this isn't because you manipulated her into doing so, it's because you allowed the relational dynamic to rebalance itself. And let's pause for a moment to recognize that this isn't easy work. There's vulnerability involved in stopping the chase. It can bring up fears. Will she forget about me? Will she move on? Will she stop caring altogether? These are human questions and they matter. But here's the truth. The woman who is truly aligned with your energy, who is genuinely interested and emotionally available, will feel drawn back towards you when you create space. And the woman who disappears in that space, she may have never truly been available in the first place. When you stop chasing, you give yourself the gift of clarity. You begin to see who she really is, and whether she is willing to meet you in a relationship where there is mutual respect, curiosity, and desire. And that clarity allows you to stand in your own dignity. You begin to see that your time, your presence, your attention, these are precious gifts. They are not to be squandered or spread too thinly in an effort to win someone over. They are to be offered to those who truly value them. And so what begins as a simple decision, I will stop chasing, unfolds into something much deeper. You begin to live as a man who knows his value, who honors his own emotional rhythm, who trusts that the right woman will meet him not because he chased her, but because he created a space where attraction could breathe. In that space, you may notice a beautiful shift in your entire relational style. Conversations feel easier because you're no longer trying to impress or win approval. Physical intimacy feels richer because it's rooted in mutual desire rather than anxious effort. Even moments of silence become comfortable rather than awkward because you're no longer filling them with nervous energy. This is where your relational confidence deepens, not as a facade, but as a natural expression of who you are when you are centered and self-possessed. You also begin to notice that your standards rise. When you stop chasing, you become more discerning about who you give your energy to. You realize that not every woman who crosses your path deserves your full attention, and this discernment is powerful. It allows you to choose women not out of loneliness or longing, but out of genuine connection and shared values. And what about her? How does she experience this change in you? Well, she feels it immediately, even if she doesn't know how to name it. She senses that you are no longer grasping for her affection. She senses that your attention is no longer scattered or desperate. And this makes her feel safe in your presence again, safe to be herself, safe to choose you without feeling chased or cornered. This is one of the greatest gifts you can offer a woman, the freedom to choose. When you stop chasing, you offer her the space to come toward you out of her own volition, not because she feels pursued, but because she feels drawn. And this shift transforms not only how she sees you, but how you see yourself. You begin to realize that you were always enough, that your presence, your groundedness, your wholeness were always what was most attractive about you. So you begin to move differently, you speak with greater calm, you listen more deeply, you hold your ground more gracefully when conversations feel challenging. And all of this contributes to an atmosphere of respect, curiosity, and genuine intimacy. By stopping the chase, you begin to embody a man who is no longer defined by external validation, but by internal alignment. And that alignment is what creates space for deep, authentic love to arise, if it is meant to. And in this new space where you are no longer driven by the need to chase, something almost imperceptible begins to unfold inside you. It's a quiet reordering, a realignment of your values, your time, your attention. You begin to see that chasing isn't just about romantic energy, it's about the way we sometimes place another person at the center of our universe in the hope they will reflect back to us who we are. But you no longer need that mirror in quite the same way. Instead of seeking validation in her response, you begin to experience validation in your own sense of wholeness. This is where maturity takes root, not as an obligation, but as a natural evolution. You begin to listen differently, not anxiously, scanning for clues about whether she still wants you, but openly, curiously, as if you are meeting her for the first time each time. You become less reactive and more responsive, because your energy is no longer tied to winning her over. And as you ground yourself here, something else gently emerges: compassion. Compassion for yourself first, for the times you chased from insecurity, for the moments you ignored your own needs in the name of pursuing hers, for the ways you tried so hard to be seen when perhaps you were overlooking yourself. This compassion softens you, but not in a way that makes you weaker. Quite the opposite. It allows you to let go of the tension you've been carrying, the pressure to perform or perfect or persuade. You start to show up differently, not as a man who is trying to prove himself, but as a man who is deeply at ease with who he is. And when you are at ease with yourself, she can be at ease too. The dynamic relaxes, the energy opens up, the dance of intimacy begins to feel fluid again. But something fascinating happens at this point. You begin to notice that it's not just about whether she comes back toward you, it's about whether you even want that dynamic anymore. You start to evaluate your relationships differently, from a place of self-respect. You may find yourself asking new questions, questions that come from a place of clarity rather than need. Does this relationship nourish me? Does she inspire me to grow? Do I feel respected in her presence? When you stop chasing, you not only give her space to come closer if she chooses, you also give yourself the space to assess whether this is the right connection for you. And that is powerful, Because so many men stay in situations where they are chasing not out of genuine desire but out of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being rejected, fear of missing out on connection. But when you stop chasing, you confront those fears directly. You realize that being alone isn't a punishment. It can be a profound period of growth. You recognize that rejection doesn't define you. It reveals what isn't aligned for you. You understand that the connection you seek externally must first be cultivated internally. And so your energy transforms again. You no longer move through your relationships with anxiety or attachment, but with discernment and grace. You're able to meet her as a partner rather than a pursuer. You listen to her words and pay attention to her actions, but you also listen to yourself. How do I feel in her presence? Does this relationship allow me to remain grounded, authentic, and alive? This is the beautiful paradox that so many people overlook. When you stop chasing, you begin to engage more deeply. Not because you are trying harder, but because you are being truer. Your emotional availability becomes more genuine because it is no longer driven by insecurity. Your confidence becomes quieter but more potent because it no longer requires validation. Your presence becomes more relaxed because it is rooted in self-trust. And she feels this shift deeply. Where she may have once felt pressured or pursued, she now feels invited. She senses that you are no longer asking her to define your worth, but are simply offering her your attention without expectation. That offering, free of pressure, is one of the most attractive and liberating experiences you can create for her. It allows her to step forward willingly if she chooses or step away gracefully if she must, and you are able to remain centered either way. This is where genuine intimacy becomes possible, not the intimacy that comes from proximity alone, but the intimacy that arises from mutual respect, curiosity, and emotional freedom. And you will notice something else as this process unfolds. Your relationships with other people begin to change too. When you stop chasing one woman, you begin to stop chasing approval in other areas of your life as well. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself in every conversation, to dominate every social situation, to gain applause or admiration constantly. Instead, you begin to practice a quiet authority, a self-assurance that does not depend on external validation. You become a better listener, a better friend, a better leader, not because you are trying harder, but because you are more at home in yourself. And that self-possession is what makes you magnetic, not just to her but to everyone around you. People sense when a man is comfortable in his own skin, when he is not desperately seeking approval, when he can hold space for himself and for others simultaneously. This is the heart of emotional maturity, learning to stay present with yourself while being fully present with others. So as you stop chasing her, you begin to cultivate this balance in every aspect of your life. You stop running after things that drain your energy and start aligning with people, projects, and passions that nourish you. You begin to walk through life with a sense of ease, not because you don't care, but because you care from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. And that ease is contagious. The people around you, women especially, feel it immediately. They feel safe in your presence because they sense that you are not asking them to complete you. They feel intrigued by you because you have become intriguing to yourself again. They feel drawn toward you because you are no longer leaning toward them anxiously, but standing firmly in your own life. This is the transformation that happens when you stop chasing. You become magnetic without trying to be. You become attractive because you are attentive first and foremost to yourself. And from this place of grounded presence, you are able to create relationships that are not based on games, strategies, or tactics, but on mutual respect, genuine curiosity, and deep emotional freedom. And as this emotional realignment takes deeper root, you begin to notice the subtle but powerful shift in how time itself feels. Without the constant urgency to chase, without the anxiety of waiting for her replies, You recover your sense of pace. Your days become fuller, not in a frantic way, but with a quiet richness. Suddenly, you are more present in your work because you are no longer distracted by thoughts of what she's thinking or doing. You enjoy conversations with friends and colleagues more fully because your mind is not elsewhere. Even your body begins to feel different, less tension in your chest, less tightness in your shoulders because you are no longer living on edge. This is one of the most underappreciated gifts of stopping the chase. It restores your freedom. The freedom to enjoy your own life again, not because she left or returned, but because you made the decision to step back into yourself. And from this place of freedom, you discover something remarkable. You begin to attract differently. You are no longer attracting from a place of neediness or lack, but from a place of quiet abundance. You become a man who is choosing, not pleading, a man who offers himself as a partner, not as a pursuer, a man who listens carefully, speaks thoughtfully, and allows space in every interaction. She feels this difference immediately. When a man stops chasing, when he becomes more discerning and grounded, it creates an entirely different atmosphere between them. Conversations slow down. There's space for laughter, for curiosity, for silence even. That beautiful silence, no longer tense or anxious, but calm and alive, becomes a place where connection can flourish. And because you are not chasing, you give her the dignity of her own space as well. You allow her to approach you when she's ready, to express her feelings when they are genuine, to reveal her interest not because she feels pressured, but because she feels inspired. This is what many men overlook. The quality of desire changes when it arises freely. When she feels drawn to you not because you chased her relentlessly, but because you showed up fully, without demand. And what happens when she begins to lean toward you again, when she reaches out, when she initiates? Here is where you have an important choice, because you're now coming from a place of clarity. You can respond thoughtfully. You are no longer so invested in winning her back that you overlook the essential question: does this feel mutual? Does this feel healthy? Does this feel good for me too? When you stop chasing, you are free to ask these questions without fear. You begin to trust that if she comes toward you, it is because she genuinely wants to, not because she feels obligated or manipulated. And this mutuality becomes the fertile ground for something deeper to grow. The dynamic is no longer about one person pursuing and the other pulling away. It becomes a dance of two sovereign individuals choosing to meet in a shared space of curiosity and desire. But what if she doesn't lean back in? What if she remains distant, aloof, unavailable? Here is where your maturity serves you again. Because when you are no longer chasing, you can see her distance for what it is, information. You can see clearly that if she remains absent when you stop chasing, it simply means that she is not ready, willing, or able to meet you where you are. And instead of blaming yourself, instead of spinning stories about what you could have done differently, you accept this as reality with grace. Acceptance is one of the greatest forms of love, not only toward her, but toward yourself. It frees you from the exhausting loops of self, doubt, and regret. It allows you to move forward without bitterness or resentment. This is where you realize that the practice of not chasing is not about getting her back, it's about coming back to yourself. And that return to self is what allows you to love more fully in the future, whether with her or with someone else. Because you are no longer willing to lose yourself in the pursuit of another. You begin to approach all your relationships with a new kind of integrity. You stop overextending, you stop proving, you stop pleading. Instead, you show up fully and invite others to meet you there. And this invitation, offered without pressure, without agenda, without chasing, is precisely what makes it so powerful. There's a beautiful paradox here. By stepping back, you create space not only for her to come toward you, but for you to see clearly whether she ever wanted to meet you in the first place. You regain agency, not just over the relationship, but over yourself, and this agency is magnetic. It sends a quiet signal: I am whole within myself, I am available for love, but I am not dependent on it. I am open, but I will not overgive, I am present, but I will not chase. This is the energy that draws women toward you, not because they feel obligated, but because they feel inspired by the freedom you embody. And as this transformation deepens, your entire way of relating changes. You start to understand that love is not something to be won or secured. It's something to be shared freely between two people who are both ready to offer and receive. So when you stop chasing her, you free her too. You release her from the pressure of carrying your hopes, your insecurities, your need for affirmation. You offer her the opportunity to choose you authentically or not, and you trust yourself enough to know that either outcome is okay. This is emotional freedom. This is mature love. This is the beginning of genuine intimacy, not the fragile intimacy built on chasing and approval, seeking, but the solid, steady intimacy built on mutual respect and self-possession. You become a man who holds space not only for her to come toward you, but for yourself to stand firmly in your own life. And this is the shift that changes everything. And as you live more fully in this new way of relating, you begin to realize that this shift is not only about romance or attraction. It touches every part of your life. When you stop chasing her, you reclaim your inner balance, your emotional autonomy, and your deepest sense of worth. You start to feel the spaciousness of your own company. Instead of seeking distraction or validation from her or anyone else, you begin to rediscover what brings you alive. Perhaps you take long walks that feel different now, not hurried or filled with longing, but peaceful, connected to your own breath and thoughts. Maybe you return to hobbies you set aside when you were consumed by the chase, or you notice how much more available you feel to your friends, your family, your work. Your attention returns home, and this quiet return to self has ripple effects you couldn't have anticipated. People feel your presence differently because you feel yourself differently. You are no longer split between your own center and your desire for someone else's approval. You are whole, and that wholeness radiates outward. You're no longer performing love, you're embodying it. And because you've stopped chasing, you give yourself the chance to be more discerning. You see people more clearly, not through the anxious filter of your own desire, but with compassion and clarity. You begin to recognize when a woman's affection is genuine, when her energy is available, when her heart is open. And equally, you recognize when it is not. This clarity frees you. It gives you permission to walk away when something isn't mutual without resentment or anger, because your worth is not on trial anymore. You are no longer a man proving himself. You are a man choosing himself. And this choosing, this ongoing choice to stand in your own dignity, this is what makes you truly attractive, not just to women, but to anyone who comes into your life. They can sense that you know your own value now. You are no longer seeking to be completed, but to be met. And this shift, it's subtle but powerful. You begin to move through life with a lighter touch. You smile more, not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer carrying the weight of need. You hold your head higher, not out of arrogance, but because you are no longer bowing your spirit to earn someone else's affection. And when she feels this in you, when any woman feels this in you, she responds differently. She feels free to approach you, to engage you, to lean into your presence without fear that you will demand or expect or pressure her. She feels your freedom, and it invites her into her own. And this, at its core, is the gift of stopping the chase. You free yourself, and in doing so, you create an environment where love can arise naturally without coercion, without anxiety, without pretense. You also begin to recognize that attraction and intimacy are not only about what you say or what you do. They are about who you are when you are with someone. When you are no longer chasing, you can simply be. You can sit with her in silence without needing to fill the space. You can listen without needing to impress. You can love without needing to possess. And that kind of presence is rare and deeply compelling. It allows her to feel seen, not because you are chasing her approval, but because you are truly present. And it allows you to feel at peace, not because she reciprocates every gesture, but because you are anchored in yourself. So as you stop chasing her, you begin to cultivate a new relationship to yourself, and this relationship sets the tone for every other relationship you will have. You start to see that true intimacy requires space, presence, and a deep trust in your own worth. You begin to trust the natural rhythms of connection. If she leans in, you meet her with curiosity and openness. If she pulls away, you let her go with grace. Because you are no longer driven by fear, you can honor what is real. And that reality, that willingness to see things as they are rather than as you wish them to be, is the foundation for any relationship that will nourish you. So perhaps you are sitting here today, still feeling the ache of having chased someone who didn't reciprocate, or wondering what will happen now that you've stopped. I want you to hear this gently. You have already won. You have won because you have returned to yourself. You have reclaimed your dignity, your emotional sovereignty, your sense of self. Whether she comes back or not is no longer the measure of your success. The true measure is this: can you hold yourself with grace in her absence? Can you meet yourself with tenderness in the quiet moments? Can you honor your worth whether she validates it or not? This is emotional freedom. This is masculine maturity. This is what it means to stop chasing, not as a tactic to get her attention, but as a practice of living from your own center. And from this place you can love again. You can open yourself without losing yourself. You can desire without attaching. You can invite without needing, and that is the heart of real intimacy. You are no longer trying to control the dance. You are simply showing up fully, present, engaged, alive, and letting the dance unfold. And that is exactly where your power lies, in your ability to be fully yourself, fully present, fully alive without chasing. So as you reflect on what we've shared here, remember this. When you stop chasing her, you come back to yourself. And that is the most important relationship of all. And when you live from that relationship, when you are whole and at ease and grounded, then everything else becomes possible. Desire, curiosity, connection, love. It all begins with you. Thank you for staying with me in this conversation today. If this spoke to you, if you felt something shift inside as you listened, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear your story, your questions, your reflections, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the Intimacy Lab for more conversations like this, honest, intimate, and real. Here's to reclaiming your presence, your dignity, and your power to love freely without chasing.